There are a lot of great moments in One Piece, and there are a lot of important categories in One Piece, so if we just use our polymerization card, today we're going to talk about the best moment in One Piece from each category. But first, let's talk about what the best moment in life is, the moment you hit subscribe for this channel. This not only gives you a space to talk about Zoro's chest, but it also gives you videos from someone who thinks Among Us jokes are funny. In other words, it gives you Zoro's chest sustenance. I need therapy. Emotion. It's a key part of One Piece, and some of my favorite parts from the show come from the moment where Oda floods you with the wave of emotion. From Mary's funeral to Ace's death and Luffy's grief, there have been so many great emotional moments in One Piece. Honestly, I can't tell you how many times I've cried while watching this series, mostly because it is an unholy number that will probably make you worried about my mental well-being. But One Piece is undeniably a tearjerker. Yeah, out of all of these moments, one in particular stands out to me as one of the most heartbreaking moments in the entire show. Dodon absolutely beating the shit out of Garp. Now listen, other than Foxy's defeat, which had me crying tears of happiness because it meant Long Ring Long Land was finally over, this scene made me cry the most. Watching Dodon walk out of the bar absolutely fuming at Garp before she proceeds to use her club to hit the man she was afraid of for her entire life. I mean, she took care of all of his grandchildren out of fear for him, yet in this moment, she fearlessly leaped at him in order to let out her anger. It's clear that she was extremely sad, and she probably spent days waiting for Garp to ask him why he didn't protect Ace. This is the definition of a mother's loss. She lost a child she looked after, someone she loved with all of her heart. Beating Garp was the only way to let out her anger, and as the camera slowly pans to her face, tears. Anger, sadness, loss, grief, hopelessness, pretty much every negative adjective in the dictionary, Dodon was feeling at this moment. This scene is heavy, and it's hard to get through. For me, seeing how others grieved the loss of Ace actually hit harder than Ace's death itself, and Dodon's breakdown was the moment in One Piece that hit me the hardest. It was also the moment in One Piece that hit Garp the hardest. Speaking of hitting hard, let's talk about action. That was the smoothest transition anyone has ever written. Holy fuck. One Piece is a shonen manga, and shonen mangas are kinda known for their action scenes, but One Piece in particular has some of the best action scenes I've ever seen. The fights are top tier, and almost every arc has featured a massive fight that has made me scream. Yet out of all of the massive fights we've seen in the story, the one I loved most was Katakuri vs. Luffy. Yeah, I know, this is basic. What about it, okay? It's good, alright? Katakuri vs. Luffy was by far the most impactful fight I've ever seen from any form of media. Watching two men give it their all for 19 episodes straight is already crazy to think about, but towards the end of the fight, I couldn't tell who I was cheering for. Both Katakuri and Luffy managed to make you want them to win, and their dedication to not only this fight but to each other was truly astonishing. Watching Luffy constantly be one-up was already scary, but then to see him continue to go back over and over again was what made me so hyped. Neither side was willing to give up, especially not Luffy, who was at the disadvantage for what felt like the entire fight. Luffy was constantly being one-upped in all ways, from his haki to his devil fruit, and watching him have to overcome that challenge is what made this battle so special. I've seen a lot of fights in my life, but none of them stand out to me as much as this one, especially when Katakuri stabbed himself. God, this fight is just such peak. Oda took a gamble with this fight being as long as it is, and it paid off. The ending to this battle is still one of the greatest endings to anything I've ever seen, and seeing Katakuri fall on his back to give a final sign of respect to Luffy always hits me in the feels. Oh, and the greatest scene ever happened in this arc.
Donuts. Umashi donuts. 穴までうましいドーナツ。一人で食うドーナツ。
So 10 out of 10. Mystery is a core part of what makes One Piece One Piece. There have been hundreds of mysteries set up throughout this series, from grand ones such as Joy Boy in the Ancient Kingdom to small ones such as why is Whitebeard called Whitebeard when he doesn't have a white beard? Or why is Zoro's chest so god? Regardless, out of all the major mysteries in the show, none of them have had such a massive impact on me as the mystery of what is Luffy's fruit. But first, story time. I caught up to One Piece right before chapter 1044, which meant that I got to hear all the theories regarding Luffy's fruit, from Sun Wukong ones to the sap ones, which... How did we get to sap, even? How did this theory even arise? Like, that was a low point, man. Regardless, the mystery of what Luffy's fruit has had me on the edge of my seat. The entire fanbase was riled up, and for the first time, I was there too. This was the first major reveal I was a part of, and goddamn was it satisfying to say that I was able to read this chapter when it came out. Truly one of the greatest moments of all time, and the reveal of Gear 5 didn't disappoint in any way. I still vividly remember scrolling through the chapter and my hands were shaking. Everything about the reveal was so perfect, and weeks of binging allowed me to read what I consider a top 5 moment in all of One Piece, if not all of media. Side note, but man, I'm so excited for the Gear 5 episode. It's gonna be so hype. Speaking of hype, let's talk about that. There have been a lot of absolutely badass moments that have made me leap out of my chair in excitement, from Luffy knocking down Kaido to the walk on Fishman Island, and even the group shot at Enies lobby. One Piece does not disappoint when it comes to generating hype. But when thinking about One Piece and hype moments, the hypest moment for me isn't even after the time skip. It was before we got Haki, before people went crazy, and before mysteries began to be revealed. In fact, the hypest moment in One Piece for me comes from an arc where nothing happened. This joke is so overused, why do I still find it funny? Now, I think I've made it pretty clear, even if you haven't watched any of my other videos, that I'm a massive Zoro simp, so this moment is obviously one of the greatest for me. Seeing his love for Luffy drive him to literally give up his body for his captain was breathtaking. I mean, I remember watching him step into that bubble and freaking out because it was certain death, right? No, of course not, the boyfriend never dies. I remember the moment that hit me hardest was watching Zoro and Sanji argue about who would take the pain, and watching Zoro knock him out hit me hella hard. It showed that they still loved each other, or maybe Zoro just wanted to excuse to hit Sanji. But for real, seeing Zoro give up his dreams so Sanji and the others could achieve theirs, it showed why he is the true right-hand man and showed his loyalty on full blast. And finally, when everyone wakes up, watching Sanji panic to try to find him hit me hella hard. And at the very end, we see Sanji stumble upon Zoro, who's standing amidst a shit ton of blood, still upright, and he proudly declares that nothing happened. This panel may be the single most badass image to ever grace the world. What Kuma declared would kill him couldn't even bring him to his knees. Nothing in One Piece has even come close to the amount of hype this moment generated for me. I remember shaking while watching this episode, and man is it so goddamn good. Zoro is the ultimate badass, and Zoro is also the ultimate hype generator. Like, you can't tell me you weren't screaming when he calmly said that nothing happened. He ended up passing out after, but like still, Jesus Christ. As a renowned comedian, I think I am a credible source when it comes to the art of being a clown. But One Piece, especially pre-time skip One Piece, is founded on comedy. Comedy was a central theme to the show just as much as action or adventure was, and some of my fondest memories come from funny moments. Honestly, one of my favorite videos on the internet is this, which is just 9 minutes of comedy. I have spat out my water many times watching this show, but one moment in particular stands out. Now, for those of you who have been around for a bit, you probably know what scene I'm talking about because I use it as background footage a lot. Like, at one point, I had a competition with myself to include it in every single video. But the scene where Luffy pushes the zombie back into his grave is by far the funniest scene to come out of One Piece. Thriller Bark in general was a really funny arc because it was a spin of the horror trope, and in this moment, watching what is otherwise a scary moment become a hilarious moment due to Luffy's stupidity is just peak writing. Especially after you pushed him down, when the zombie broke character to yell at Luffy, I remember just straight up dying in my bed. And it doesn't even end there, because after the zombie yells at Luffy, Luffy with no hesitation yells out, "It's an injured old man." Like, you can't get any better than this. Luffy's stupidity combined with the bizarre situation we were provided in is one of the greatest moments in all of One Piece for me, and it is by far the funniest to me. But now we're on to what One Piece and One Piece fans are notoriously known for: foreshadowing. I mean, this was an actual tweet that I saw, so, you know, foreshadowing is pretty big in One Piece. But by far my favorite piece of foreshadowing in the show comes from an arc chock full of foreshadowing. The arc that many people skipped, but no one should have. The one with the god as a villain. Long Ring Longland. What? Why are you staring? Anyways, I have a confession. This is more than just a singular moment. Skypiea had some of the greatest foreshadowing in the history of ever, and all of the foreshadowing towards Gear 5 that happened during this arc has to be my favorite pieces of foreshadowing. From the singular panel of Luffy partying with Oda dropping hints through an interview, not even in the story, but through an interview, to Luffy ringing the bell and saying, "Let the sun shine." God, this was all so good. The reveal of Gear 5 was one of my favorite reveals, and the foreshadowing towards it was so painfully obvious in retrospect, but at the same time, it was completely hidden, which is what I love about Oda's foreshadowing. It's something only Oda can do, and God is it so good. Overall though, that's my list, but let me know what your guys' list is, because I'm sure it'll be different than mine, and I'm curious to hear your reasons as well. Let me know down below in the comments. Overall though, that's it for me. Thank you.